Hey, how is everybody today? I'm going to do a video to show you a little bit how to make sourdough bread once you've already got the starter. This is for a bunch of friends of mine that I'm giving starters to, and I'm going to give starters to in the future. I want them to have a little video to guide them through what they do through the process. So basically, the starters are, I'll give you a small, this is a fairly large jar, but I'll give you a small jar and it'll have your sourdough starter in the bottom of it, and what you'll do is you'll feed it. So feeding it is just basically mixing half a cup of flour, bread flour, half a cup of warm water, pouring it into this, mixing it up, and letting it eat in a warm situation for about 3 hours. Feed it again, let it eat, feed it again, 3 hours later, let it eat. When you get it to where it's starting to look like this, it's really bubbly and it's been going, it's really been eating. This one's been eating for 2 days now, so it's really got a nice culture going. Then what we're going to do is we're going to pour off. So what you would do is you'll pour off half of what you have in your culture jar, what you've been feeding it. And I'm going to get each one of these because I've got 3 of them going, and I want to use a little bit of each one because I want to keep feeding them so I can give them away as gifts. So I got those 2, and I'll end up with a little over a cup of starter. And they call for a cup, but I like a little bit more. So I'm going to have about 1.5 cups of starter. So this is my starter that's been fed. It's all bubbly. It's going really good. And I'm going to dump it into a bowl. Okay? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a 1.5 cups of warm water. So I got about 1.5 cups of that starter. And I'm going to pour 1.5 cups of warm water into the starter. And I like doing this because what you can do then is you can actually really mix up the starter with your water, and what you'll turn it into is it'll almost come out like a milk. It'll get kind of milky. Okay? So that's what you got. Whoops. So we got it all mixed up. It's like a liquid milk. And then what we're going to do is we're going to take and I just use a simple Stater Brothers bread flour. Okay? You can use organic flours and different flours, sweet potato, whatever you want. So what we're going to do now is the total recipe is going to call for 5 cups. But you're going to see how I do things. It's basically I go off the consistency of what I've got, if I need more flour or less flour or what's going on. So we're going to get 3 cups today. So what I like to do with this, the same kind of thing. I like to just start with a cup at a time. Don't put all 3 cups in here. Because if you start with a cup at a time, then you can mix it in and it'll get mixed really good. If you pour all 3 cups in, you end up with a really heavy doughy flour, but I can take each cup and mix it, and it's like milk. It's getting thicker, but now I can beat in the flour. And you want to give it a lot of air, because as you give it air, that's what helps it to start cultivating the culture into the new flour and the new water that you added. So that's 1 cup. There's 2 cups going in. Kitty's here, she's helping. She's out there chasing the birds. So you can see now it's getting a little thicker. It's starting to look more like a pancake batter. But I can mix it up really good by not having added all the flour at one time. So I get it nice and mixed up. And then I'll go for my 3rd cup of flour. And now I can already tell that because I put a little extra starter in, so I got a little more liquid, I'm going to probably need more than 3 cups to start this. And how I'll show you how I can tell that it's at the point that I feel comfortable with getting ready for the next step, which is we're going to let it rise for about, see how that's still like liquidy? You can see it, but it's kind of still got, it's really thick, like a really thick pancake batter, but it's still liquid. I don't want it to be liquid like that. I want it to start to get a little more doughy. So what I'm going to do is get me another cup of flour. I'm going to add it in, mix it up, add it in, see how we're doing now. Yeah, see now it's starting to turn more into almost a dough. It's starting to look kind of doughy. See that? Now it's not quite so liquidy, it's holding together. A little bit more. Just tell. I kind of do a lot of this off feel. I just kind of find my way to what feels right when it starts to get like this. So there it is. See how it's starting to become a dough? You see how it's starting to look more like a dough? It sticks to my spoon. That's what you want. That's the kind of consistency you want after you've mixed it, your sourdough starter with your water. So we want to mix this up real good. Make sure that we got all that flour mixed in with it. And then what you're going to do is you're going to kind of just work it to the center of your bowl. Let it sit at the center of your bowl. Like that. See how it's pretty much a dough now. So I'm going to take that now. And you see how that is? It's the consistency. It kind of holds a form. It's like a dough, basically. Still got a little softness to it, a little roll if I let it. But it's pretty nice. Now what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to take that and put it in the refrigerator overnight. So I set that in the refrigerator overnight. Well, I leave it out for about 2 or 3 hours and let it rise up a little bit. And then I put it in the refrigerator. Okay? So after I put it in the refrigerator, it'll come out kind of looking like... kind of looking like this. Which is now it's really kind of stuck, like a real dough. That's what it comes out of the refrigerator after you let it rise a bit, and then put it in the fridge. It'll kind of sink itself down. So what I do here is I've already got 3 cups of flours in there, and I should need about 2 more. Or you saw I had 3.5 on the last one. So what I do is I start with a cup of flour, and I put it on the counter. I'm going to move all these out of here. All my starters. So I put that cup of flour on there, and then what I do is I take my spoon, here. Okay, where did I put my spoon? You guys probably saw it, but I don't see it here, so, oh, there it is. So I loosen this up, because I had put some, see how it's not quite sticking to the bowl now. I loosen this up, and then I turn it out onto my cup of flour. So I've emptied the bowl. I put the dough that I have on my cup of flour that's here. Now this is the step where you start to have some fun. So the recipe calls for a little bit of sugar. So I'm using it's a coconut organic sugar. And I just do a pinch, maybe a teaspoon or so on top. The sugar kind of activates some stuff. It calls for 1.5 tablespoons of salt. So what I tend to do is I'll just do a grinder with some salt, and I don't measure much out. And you'll see as you eat the bread, if you want it to be saltier, you'll put more salt in it. But I basically just grind out a nice Himalayan salt into it, because salt's really important in your bread. Don't use iodine salt. Use either a sea salt or a Himalayan salt. So you see I put a pretty good dash in there. What I'll do too is I'll add actually some salts like garlic salt and different things. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some seasonings. So I have, for example, I have up here, I have some dried rosemary. So I'm going to take that off and sprinkle it into here. I'm going to take some thyme. I'm going to sprinkle it into here. Okay. I'm going to take some, this is parsley flakes. I really like an Italian kind of sourdough bread. So I'll put some parsley flakes in there. I'll put some dill. This dill is kind of an interesting flavor. A little flavor of that in your bread is kind of nice. You can put whatever you want. Just go to your cupboard and find. I've got some Italian seasonings, which is kind of the mix of a lot of what I've already done. I put quite a bit because I give it some good flavor. And I have some extra things that I like to throw in. For example, I have some sesame seeds I got in Costa Rica, which is a shake, and it's kind of got some really nice seasonings in it. So the sesame seeds go in there. And then I've got some flax seeds. I like seeds in my bread. I put some flax seeds in here, put some of those in, and I got a little bit more of a sea salt, but this sea salt has got a little, it's not a curry, but it's kind of some kind of a paste that ends up giving a really nice flavor. And I just, over time, I found that I really like this flavor in my bread. So I put a little of that in. I got a little bit, I always like putting a little oil on my bread because somehow the oil activates it. So this is a pepper bread that's oil that's been soaking in some peppers. Going to have a little bit of kick to it, but not much. It's not going to affect the bread. It's more just to give it that ability to kick off the yeast. Somehow oil does something to the bread. So I put that in there, and let's see. I think I pretty much got everything. And oh, no, this is my favorite ingredient. Get this open now that everything's all powdered up. Oh, yeah. There. Okay, what this is some minced garlic. So it's basically all chopped up and everything. And why I like this is because it's got a lot of liquid in top. Yeah. So what I'll do is take a new jar of this. I get it at the 99-cent store. There's nothing. And I'll press down and get basically the garlic, quite a bit of it to the bottom. So I end up with a nice pile of it on the top. And I pour that garlic juice, along with some garlic, because I like garlic in my bread. I'll pour that into this bread. Okay. You can see I'm putting quite a bit of garlic, probably about a quarter of that jar, because that really garlic flavor in that bread is something delicious. So I'll mix that in, and then what I do, because of the liquid of the garlic, I'll throw a little flour over the top. Okay, so now I'm just going to do a little kneading, and I like to kind of start by just working all of those seasonings down into the bread. And this is another one of those, how do you know when it's ready? It's just all feel. You can feel now it's really like loose and there's a lot of stuff. I just like to put the flour back in, put the seasonings in, just kind of mix that whole thing up really good. And get as much of that flavorful stuff working in the bread that I can. Okay, so I'm going to work it in, and I'm going to work it in. And this is really the only time that you're going to have to actually knead the bread. The rest of the times you're basically just doing your mixing, putting it in the bowls, doing your stuff. This is really the only process because you don't have to knead it every time you go to the next step in this recipe. Works really good. So you can see I'm just working that flour in there, which is thickening up that bread slowly, not real quick. Hopefully I'll have enough time in my video because this is a little process that takes a little bit. I'll work it in there and just keep pushing it in. I like with my fingers and my thumbs in the beginning, just to be able to get it to stretch out in it. And then what I'll start doing is I'll start rolling it, and I start stretching it out. And what you can see is how it'll start to break and stretch like that. You can feel what's going on is the yeast stuff is starting to activate. And it's starting to take a little bit of the dough with it, which is a good thing. As you warm it up, as you work it, as you get all those seasonings mixed in really good. Put that flour in. Now I know for a fact I'm going to need more flour, so I'm going to put some more on here just to keep moving it in with all the seasonings and stuff. You'll end up with about a total of 5 to 6 cups of flour. And I just can tell when this bread starts to get, a lot of it is if it's sticky and it sticks on your hands, it needs more flour. It shouldn't stick to you. So if it sticks to you, just put your hands with some flour on them and start working it again. Eventually, you're going to get all that seasoning and all the liquid and all the stuff we put in mixed in with the bread. It'll take a little bit, this process. So I'm just going to go to work on it. You can watch. And don't be afraid to experiment with the stuff you put in it. You can do a nut bread. You can do it just because it's sourdough doesn't mean it has to be sourdough. If you want it sour, if you really want it to be a good sourdough, you can take a little bit of citric acid, it's called. You can get it at on Amazon. And basically what this is a sour acid. And it'll turn your bread into a little more sour. And I use a little on it because I've noticed if I use what they call for in the recipe, it gives me kind of a sour stomach because it really turns the bread sour. So I'll put a little of that citric acid in there just to kind of give it a little more sourdough taste, because this one's more of just a seed and a garlic and an herb, which, you know, the extra sourdough will make all that stuff taste great. Now we're mixing it up. You can see it's starting to take the texture of some bread. It's starting to look like what your grandma or somebody, when they made bread, what they had. And all of this is coming. There's no yeast in here. It's all coming out of that sourdough culture. And the sourdough culture, you can buy it online. You can get San Francisco sourdough culture. You can get them from bakeries. A lot of times bakeries will have 100-year-old San Francisco ones, because what happens is they call it like the mother and the baby. They used to call it a friendship bread, and you know, people will give them away. And so some of those cultures have been alive and going for a long, long time. And I've noticed the older they are, the better they work and the quicker in terms of the bread and how they do everything and what they do. So, you see how that's come now? We got her looking a lot more like dough. I probably got a total of about 5.5 cups of flour in this stuff. And it's really starting to look good. So now, what I'm going to do, I feel pretty good about where this is. I'm just going to roll it up to a nice bowl. That. Alright, see how I did that and pack it in there and just kind of work it into a nice little ball of bread. So it kind of looks like a small little loaf of bread. See that? It looks really good. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it into a bowl. Now what I like to do before I put it in the bowl, I like to flour this up a little around the edges of the bowl. So put a little flour on the bottom, flour the edges up, because what that'll do is when you go to take it out, it'll keep it from cutting. I'm going to probably need a bigger bowl because this is going to rise quite a bit. But basically I want to show you what will happen. So now we got our bread. It's got all our seasonings. You can see the herbs and the color and the spices and the seeds, everything that's in there. So we got everything loaded in the bread. It's ready to go. Now what we're going to do is we're going to let this rise. So I'm going to let it rise for about, I like to go at least 4 hours. It's 1 o'clock, so about 5. I'm going to get ready to work with it. And what will happen is it'll lift up to a nice big loaf of bread. And then I'll take a really sharp serrated knife like this. And I'll take that and all I'll do is once that thing gets big, I'll just cut it into 4 pieces. Okay, and I just work my way down with the knife, cutting it, until I get 4 individual pieces that look a bit like this. And then what I'll do is I'll just lay them on the counter with a little bit of flour, and I'll shape them. You don't need to knead it and do it again. You want to kind of leave that rise that's in there already in it. So what I'll do is I'll cut this in 4 pieces, okay, because I'll end up with 4 loaves of bread out of this, and the loaves of bread will be pretty good size, probably something like this, pretty close. This is the last batch I did. There were 4 loaves that came out. You know, you can see it's got some nice color in it. It's got the slats in it. So what I'll do is I'll cut that into the 4 pieces. I'll lay each of that piece down. I'll shape it and everything. I'll get it into kind of a shape of a loaf. Then I just take a cookie sheet, put a little bit of oil on top of it, and I'll set those loaves on the cookie sheet. Make sure you leave a lot of room because this stuff's going to blow up pretty good. It may look like a small loaf when you start, but it'll get to be a good sized loaf by the time it rises. So you put them on an oiled cookie sheet, right? Put 2 pieces. I like to do 2 loaves on a cookie sheet, 2 loaves on the other cookie sheet. I got 4 loaves. So I basically set them up, and I'll set them by the fire, or I'll set them in the oven. We have a gas oven, so I can put the loaves in there and close it with the pilot. So it's nice and warm. In about 4 hours, those loaves will be nice and big. You have to be really careful when you're taking those loaves out of the oven, because you're going to have to heat up the oven, right? And if you bang it, they'll drop. If they drop, you might as well just knead them and start all over, because as you can lose the volume and the holes you get in a sourdough. So what you want to do, you want to heat them up in the oven slowly, like with just the pilot. I don't recommend doing this, but I do it every once in a while. I'll turn a little gas on just to get a little extra heat. Maybe I want it in 3 hours instead of 4. I'll heat it up a little more. But you got to be careful because you can't bake it. You don't want it to get cooked when it's rising. So you get your bread all nice and puffed up. You set your oven to, I usually do about 425. You do 425 to 400 to 450, however you want to do it. You'll work with it. You'll see. I found 425 is about right. I do it 20 minutes. I take a look at it. I can kind of tell. Yeah, and just before, when I got it laying on the pan, oil pan, and those loaves are there, I'll take a little bit of water on my hands and I'll just sprinkle over the top of the bread. That water gives it that crustiness that you get on a good sourdough. So you don't want to do too much, but you just get your hands wet and just sprinkle it on top. If you want to spray it with a light mist bottle, you can do that too. That gives it. And then what I do as it's laying there on the thing, you can see the cuts in the top of the bread. I found that when I first put it on the pan, I want to just make those slices with the same knife I used to cut it apart. And I just cut them on the thing and I leave them. Why do I do it then? They say in the recipe do it after it's risen. Because when you cut it after it's risen, it's like pounding it and it drops and you lose the density. So cut it before it rises. Give those slices on top. Let it set on the pan. Put it by a warm place by your fire in your oven. Let it rise. 4 hours, 5 hours. You just look at it. You'll know it's nice. It looks really good. Take those pans over. Preheat your oven. I like to put a pan of water in the bottom of the oven when I'm heating it up, and I leave it in there all through the cooking. It adds a little moisture, gives the sourdough some crispiness. So I put that in there. I set the oven up to 420. I let it preheat. Once it's heated, I take all 4 of my loaves. I put them into separate shells, put them in the oven. I let them cook together. Then I pull them out and I get them onto any kind of a warming thing that you can set them on, take a little heat off of them right away, and then I'll move them onto a breadboard or something like that. Well, I hope this helps you. So the process is really simple. I'll go through it. So we got our sourdough culture that you've either been given or you got somehow. Okay, you're feeding it 3 or 4 times in your first day. It takes 2 days to do the whole process. So your first day you're just feeding it every 3 hours. Half a cup of flour, half a cup of water, mix it up, pour it in, mix it up, pour a little bit of this off. If it starts to get bigger where it's rising out of the thing, just pour it off into your cup and a half that you're going to use to make your bread, or pour it into another jar and give it as a friendship to someone else, right? But you're going to feed it and feed it and feed it 3 times at least. Once you get it to that point, then you're going to start this process of putting it in here. The whole process, you kind of have to start in the morning with the feeding. I fed it last night, all day yesterday. I fed it right before I went to bed last night. I got up this morning, I fed it again, and then I went into this process. And it was bubbling fine. You can tell if it's bubbling and you can smell that sourdough tight, you know that you've let it feed enough. And you can put it in, then what you do, you put your cup and a half approximately of your feeder, you put a cup and a half of warm water, mix it into a liquid, add your 3 cups plus of flour into that until it becomes kind of doughy. Then you take that doughy mixture that we got, which is still kind of, you can see it's just kind of a little bit doughy. It'll end up hard like that one was. Once I let it set out, I'll set that out where it'll warm up, and I'll let it warm for about 3 or 4 hours, and then I'll stick it in the refrigerator. Tomorrow I'm making 4 more loaves of that because I'm letting it rise again. I'm doing this process where you put that dough that you pull out of the oven onto your countertop with a cup of flour, mix all of your herbs and spices and oils and whatever you want in it, get it all nice, add maybe another half a cup of flour. Should end up with about 5 to 6 cups of flour in it all. Mix that up really nice, get it so it's shaped like a nice little loaf, put it in your bowl. And I'll tend to always I don't know why, my aunt used to make bread all the time, and she did this, and it was kind of cool. I get a kind of a cool little thing, and I'll put it over the top of it, and I'll let it rise, sitting by the fire or something. You'll see it'll puff up nice and big, really beautiful, and then you got your sourdough. So I really appreciate you being here, and I hope that helps. I hope this video will help you get your sourdough coming out, and experiment with it. Drop me a line at gardnerziggy@gmail.com. Gardner Ziggy, like Ziggy Marley, @gmail.com, and let me know how it works for you. You have a good one. Thanks for being here. Take care. And remember, can never get enough sourdough. Okay, all I gotta do is get it to shut off.